They bet I'd fail the death race. Now I'm their champion. Blood roars in Jake Thorne's ears as he slams his junk-heap ship into gear. The interplanetary death race erupting around him in a hellstorm of fire and shrapnel. Alien warlords bet millions he'll die screaming in the first mile. Kira Zoreth, the galaxy's most lethal racer, locks eyes with him, her sneer promising a grave in the stars. Earth scum, the crowd howls, hurling plasma bottles. One slip, and Jake's guts paint the asteroid belt. Will this human nobody flip the galaxy's bloodlust into legend, or explode in a fireball of cosmic humiliation? The interplanetary death race erupted with a roar that shook the alien planet to its core. Volcanic peaks belched molten rivers, their crimson glow painting the jagged horizon. Icy sandstorms screamed across desolate plains, flinging razor-sharp grains that could strip flesh from bone. Gravity-defying chasms yawned beneath the racers' paths, daring anyone foolish enough to cross. Hover ships and sleek speeders tore through the air, their engines blazing with alien tech, blues, greens, and purples flaring like dying stars. On floating platforms, spectators from across the galaxy, tentacled, scaled, or armored, howled with bloodthirsty glee. Their alien voices buzzed, a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and guttural roars, all reveling in the galaxy's deadliest spectacle. Jake Thorne, the lone human pilot from Earth, gripped the controls of his cobbled-together ship, the Maverick. His brown eyes, sharp with focus, scanned the treacherous course. Sweat beaded on his brow, matting his dark beard. His ship was a patchwork of scavenged parts, its hull scarred from years of cargo runs through lawless sectors. Compared to the gleaming, tech-heavy vessels of his competitors, the Maverick looked like a junkyard reject. Jake didn't care. He wasn't here for glory. He was here to prove humanity wasn't the weak, fragile species the galaxy thought. The crowd didn't hesitate to remind him of their doubts. The human won't last past the first turn, a multi-eyed Zoreth jeered from a platform, its 6 pupils glinting with malice. He'll be ash before round 3. A scaled Krillian roared, its laughter sparking a wave of mockery through the throng. Jake's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening on the controls. Their words stung, but they only fueled his resolve. He wasn't just racing for himself. He was carrying the weight of every human who'd ever been dismissed as inferior. The starting klaxon blared, a deafening wail that vibrated through the Maverick's frame. Jake slammed the thrusters, and his ship lurched forward, engines groaning against the planet's brutal terrain. The course was a nightmare. Jagged spires of obsidian jutted from the ground. Molten rivers snaked through narrow passes, and sudden gusts of icy wind threatened to hurl ships into cliffs. Jake weaved through the chaos, his hands steady despite the sweat stinging his eyes. The other racers surged ahead, Zoreth warships with spike hulls, Krillian speeders with cloaking tech, and insectoid Vrax pilots skittering on anti-grav sleds. Jake was an ant among giants, but he'd learned long ago that size didn't win races, grit did. Barely 3 minutes in, danger struck. A Zoreth racer, his ship a monstrous beast of spiked armor, veered into Jake's path. The pilot's amber eyes gleamed through his cockpit, cold and predatory. He angled his ship, forcing the Maverick toward a bubbling lava pit. Heat seared through the hull, the cockpit glowing red as warning alarms screamed. Jake's heart pounded, his hands wrestling the controls. The lava's glow filled his vision, promising a fiery end. "Not today," he growled, yanking the stick hard. The Maverick groaned, skimming the pit's edge, but the Zoreth pressed closer, relentless. A shadow streaked past. A sleek, obsidian ship, its lines sharp as a blade, cut between Jake and the Zoreth. With a burst of energy, it nudged the Maverick back from the brink, sending the Zoreth's ship spinning into a rock spire. The comms crackled, and a cool, melodic voice cut through the chaos. "I saved you to keep the race fair," it said, laced with icy precision. "Don't expect it again." Jake glanced out his cockpit window, his breath catching. The pilot was Kira, a Zorth champion whose name echoed through the galaxy's racing circuits. Her amber eyes met his through the reinforced glass, sharp and challenging, framed by a cascade of silver hair that shimmered like liquid metal. Her ship, the Eclipse, was a masterpiece of stealth tech, its hull absorbing light like a black hole. Compared to Jake's battered rig, it was a predator to his prey. "Thanks," he grunted over the comms, steadying his breath. "Guess I owe you one." Kira's lips twitched faintly, a flicker of amusement or disdain. He couldn't tell. "Survive first," she replied. "Then we'll talk debts." Her ship vanished in a flicker of cloaking tech, leaving Jake to refocus on the course. The lava pit fell behind, but the race was far from over. He pushed the Maverick harder, dodging a hail of ice shards flung by a sudden sandstorm. The crowd's taunts echoed in his mind, but so did Kira's voice, cool, confident, and just a little mocking. It lit a fire in him, a need to prove he could keep up. The first leg of the race was a relentless gauntlet. Jake navigated through a canyon of jagged rock spires, each turn a gamble between speed and survival. Kira's ship reappeared intermittently, a phantom weaving through the chaos with surgical precision. He caught glimpses of her skill, banking hard to avoid a collapsing cliff, firing countermeasures to deflect a stray plasma bolt from a malfunctioning drone. Her moves were artful, almost hypnotic, but Jake refused to be outdone. He gunned his engines, skimming a chasm's edge so close the hull sparked against the rock. The crowd gasped, their jeers turning to murmurs. "Still here," he muttered, a grim smile tugging at his lips. The first checkpoint loomed ahead, a floating platform ringed with refueling stations and repair drones. Jake landed the Maverick with a jolt, the hull hissing as it cooled. He climbed out, his boots crunching on the platform's metallic surface. Sweat soaked his flight suit, and his shoulder ached from the strain of wrestling the controls. Across the platform, Kira emerged from the Eclipse, her tall frame clad in sleek Zorth armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. Her silver hair caught the light of the twin suns, and her amber eyes scanned the crowd with a warrior's vigilance. Jake approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Nice save back there," he said, his voice rough but genuine. She leaned against her ship, arms crossed, her posture radiating confidence. "Don't flatter yourself," she said, her tone sharp but not cruel. "I'd hate for a cheap trick to ruin the competition." He grinned, undeterred by her chill. "Fair enough. But you've got to admit, I'm still here." Kira's eyes narrowed, appraising him like a predator sizing up prey. "For now," she said, her voice low. "Humans don't belong in this race." Jake stepped closer, his grin fading, but his gaze steady. "Maybe not, but I'm not here to lose." The air between them crackled, a spark of rivalry igniting. Her lips parted as if to fire back, but a low rumble cut her off. Shadows moved at the platform's edge, rogue racers, their ships bristling with illegal plasma cannons. Their leader, a hulking Zorth with scars crisscrossing his face, sneered through the comms. "No Zorth, or human, will take this prize." Kira's posture stiffened, her hand hovering near a concealed blade at her thigh. "They're a coalition," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "They'll kill anyone who threatens their kind's dominance, even me." Jake's pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding his veins. He met her gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. "Then we take them down together," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. The rogue charged, their ships spitting plasma bolts that scorched the platform. Jake dove behind a refueling tank, dragging Kira with him as a blast vaporized the spot where they'd stood. She drew her blade in a flash, slicing a projectile midair with a precision that made Jake's jaw drop. "Move!" she barked, already sprinting for the Eclipse. Jake scrambled to the Maverick, his hands flying over the controls as he powered up. The rogue ships closed in, their weapons locking on. Working in tandem, Jake and Kira launched their ships, dodging plasma blasts in a frantic dance. Jake banked hard, drawing fire to give Kira an opening. She seized it, her ship cloaking and reappearing behind the rogues, her countermeasures disabling one of their cannons. The rogues faltered, their formation breaking under the unexpected teamwork. By the time the dust settled, the coalition retreated, their ships limping back into the shadows. Jake and Kira landed, their ships scorched but intact. Jake caught Kira's gaze as they climbed out, his chest heaving. "Not bad for a human," she said, her tone grudgingly impressed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. He wiped soot from his face, matching her smirk. "Not bad for a Zorath who claims she doesn't need help." Her eyes flashed, but there was no malice, only the first flicker of respect. The cosmic thorn forest loomed ahead, a sprawling labyrinth of towering, sentient trees that pulsed with malevolent life. Their gnarled branches, thick as starship hulls, twisted into a canopy that blotted out the twin suns, casting the course in eerie twilight. Each tree bristled with venomous spines, glistening, needle-sharp, and capable of piercing even Zorath armor. The spines quivered, sensing movement, ready to fire at anything that dared pass. Jake Thorne gripped the Maverick's controls, his brown eyes darting across the maze. The air hummed with danger, the forest low, guttural groans vibrating through his ship's frame. This was no ordinary racecourse. It was a predator, and he was its prey. Jake's heart thudded as he piloted the Maverick into the forest maw. The first cluster of trees loomed, their spines glinting like daggers in the dim light. He scanned the path, his mind racing. A direct route would trigger a barrage, shredding his ship in seconds. Then it hit him, a crazy human idea. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, slamming the thrusters. The Maverick surged forward, aiming straight for a massive trunk. The crowd on the floating platforms gasped, their alien voices rising in disbelief. "He's insane," a Krillian hissed. "The human's done for," a Vrax chittered. Jake ignored them, his jaw set. The ship's nose struck the tree with a bone-rattling crunch, the impact jarring his teeth. The tree shuddered, its spines retracting inward to shield itself, clearing a narrow path through the thicket. "Crazy works." Jake grinned, gunning the engines to speed through the gap. Behind him, Kira's sleek Eclipse flickered into view, her cloaking tech rendering her ship a ghostly blur. She slipped past the spines unscathed, her movements fluid, almost mocking. The comms crackled, her melodic voice laced with amusement. "Not bad, human, but slow." Jake chuckled, undaunted, his hands steady on the controls. "I'll take ingenuity over gadgets any day." Her ship surged ahead, flickering back into view as she overtook him, a silent taunt in her wake. Jake couldn't help but admire her precision, every turn calculated, every risk measured. Her Eclipse danced through the forest, dodging spines with an elegance that made his brute force tactics look clumsy. Still, he kept pace, weaving through the maze with dogged determination, his ship's hull scraping against branches that snapped like gunfire. The forest grew denser, the trees' groans rising to a deafening chorus. Spines whizzed past, embedding in the ground with hisses of venom. Jake banked hard, narrowly avoiding a barrage that peppered the Maverick's wing, leaving smoking holes. "Too close," he growled, adjusting his course. Kira's ship vanished again, her cloaking tech giving her an edge, but Jake caught glimpses of her trail, disturbed branches, faint energy signatures. She was good, but he wasn't about to let her outshine him. He pushed the Maverick harder, skimming a tree's roots, so close the hull sparked. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their mockery tinged with reluctant awe. "The human's still alive?" a Zorath muttered. "For now." Another sneered. Jake's grin widened. Let them talk. He'd show them what humans were made of. The second checkpoint emerged, a metallic platform suspended in a clearing, its surface scarred from past races. Jake landed the Maverick with a jolt, the hull hissing as it cooled. He climbed out, his flight suit damp with sweat, his shoulders stiff from the forest's relentless demands. Across the platform, Kira stood by the Eclipse, her Zorath armor gleaming like polished obsidian. Her silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her amber eyes glinted as she leaned against her ship, arms crossed. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, their rivalry a live wire ready to spark. Jake approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not bad out there," he said, his voice rough but laced with respect. "That cloaking trick's something else." Kira's eyes narrowed, appraising him like a blade testing its edge. "You think you're some kind of hero?" she scoffed, her tone sharp enough to cut. "This isn't one of your human fairy tales." Jake crossed his arms, meeting her gaze without flinching. "And you think tech makes you invincible? At least I don't hide behind it." Her jaw tightened, but a flicker of something, curiosity, maybe respect, crossed her face. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Why are you even here, human? This race chews up warriors. What makes you think you belong?" Jake hesitated, his usual bravado faltering. Her question hit deeper than he expected. "To prove we're not as weak as you think," he said finally, his voice steady but raw. "Humans might not have your tech or your strength, but we don't quit. Not ever." Kira's lips parted, as if to retort, but her eyes held his, searching. For a moment, the platform's noise faded. The hum of repair drones, the chatter of spectators, the clank of refueling tanks. Something shifted between them, a spark of understanding, or maybe just mutual defiance. The moment shattered as the air exploded with gunfire. Plasma bolts scorched the platform, sending sparks flying. Jake dove for cover behind a refueling tank, his heart racing. Kira was already moving, her blade drawn in a flash of silver. A projectile screamed toward her, but she sliced it midair, the halves clattering harmlessly to the ground. "Rogues," she hissed, her eyes scanning the shadows. A fleet of ships emerged, their hulls bristling with banned plasma cannons. The Rogue Coalition was back, their leader's voice booming through the comms. "No Zorith supremacy, or human filth, will claim this race." A stray shot grazed Kira's arm, green blood seeping through her armor. "You're hit," Jake yelled, rushing to her side. She waved him off, grimacing. "It's nothing. We need to move." But the rogues closed in, their ships forming a deadly arc. Jake grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind a wrecked ship. "We can't outgun them," he said, his mind racing. "But we can outsmart them." He scanned the terrain, spotting a pile of debris. Discarded fuel canisters, twisted metal. An idea sparked. "Cover me," he said, already moving. Kira nodded, her blade a blur as she deflected incoming fire. Jake sprinted to the debris, dragging a canister into position. He rigged it with a spare charge from his toolkit, his hands steady despite the chaos. "Get ready," he shouted, hurling the canister toward the rogues. Kira fired a precise shot, detonating it in a blinding explosion. The blast scattered the rogues' formation, their ships veering wildly. "Now!" Jake yelled, diving for the Maverick. Kira was already at the Eclipse, her ship's sensors syncing with his to navigate the smoke. They launched, weaving through the forest-spine barges as the rogues pursued. Jake's hands flew over the controls, dodging venomous darts that hissed past. Kira's voice crackled through the comms, guiding him through a narrow pass. "Left now," she barked. He obeyed, the Maverick skimming a tree's roots as spines rained down behind them. The rogues weren't as lucky. One ship took a direct hit, its hull crumpling under a barrage. The others faltered, their pursuit slowing as the forest defenses turned against them. Jake and Kira pushed deeper into the maze, the rogues' signals fading. They found a sheltered ravine, its walls jagged but quiet, and landed to catch their breath. Kira slumped against a rock, clutching her arm. Green blood stained her armor, her face pale under the dim light. "You didn't have to help me," she said quietly, her voice softer than he'd ever heard. Jake knelt beside her, tearing a strip from his sleeve to bandage her wound. "Yeah, I did," he said, his tone firm but gentle. "We're in this together now." She studied him, her amber eyes searching his face. Her defenses softened, just a fraction. "They hate me too, you know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My own kind. I'm not the perfect Zorith they want." Jake paused, his hands stilling on the bandage. He met her gaze, seeing the weight she carried. "Then we've got more in common than I thought," he said, his voice low. "I'm not exactly the galaxy's idea of a champion either." Their eyes held, the ravine's silence wrapping around them. For the first time, Kira didn't look away. The ravine's quiet held a rare pause in the relentless chaos of the interplanetary death race. Jake Thorne knelt beside Kira, tying off the makeshift bandage on her arm. Her green blood had slowed to a trickle, but her face remained pale, her amber eyes clouded with pain. The cosmic thorn forest loomed beyond the ravine's jagged walls, its sentient trees groaning faintly in the distance. Jake's hands lingered on the bandage, his touch steady but careful. "You good?" he asked, his voice low, rough from the strain of their escape. Kira's gaze flicked to his, sharp despite her injury. "I've survived worse," she said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. She pushed herself upright, wincing as she flexed her arm. "We can't stay here long. The rogues won't give up." Jake nodded, scanning the ravine. Their ships, the Maverick and the Eclipse, sat side by side, their hulls scarred from the forest spines and the rogues' plasma blasts. The air smelled of burnt metal and venom, a reminder of how close they'd come to death. He stood, offering her a hand. She ignored it, rising on her own, but the ghost of a smirk tugged at her lips. "Don't get soft, human." Jake grinned, unfazed. "Wouldn't dream of it." He moved to the Maverick, popping open a panel to check the damage. The fuel lines were intact, but the thrusters had taken a beating. Kira joined him, her fingers deftly inspecting the Eclipse's cloaking module. They worked in silence, the hum of their tools blending with the forest's distant groans. Jake stole glances at her, noting the way her silver hair caught the dim light, the tension in her shoulders. Her admission in the ravine, her own kind's rejection, had cracked her icy facade, revealing a vulnerability he hadn't expected. It made her real, not just a Zorth champion, but someone fighting her own battles. Kira caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "Focus, human. Or do you plan to stare your way to victory?" Her tone was sharp, but there was a teasing lilt beneath it. "Bleak child, turning both. Just making sure you don't pass out on me. I'd hate to carry you through the next round." She snorted, tossing a wrench at him. He caught it midair, their eyes locking in a brief, charged moment. The rivalry was still there, but it was softening, edged with something warmer. Their repairs were interrupted by a faint hum, growing louder. Jake's head snapped up, his hand dropping to the blaster at his hip. "Company," he muttered. Kira's blade was already drawn, her posture coiled like a spring. A single rogue ship emerged at the ravine's entrance, its hull bristling with plasma cannons. It wasn't the Coalition's full force, just a scout, but dangerous enough. Its pilot's voice crackled through the comms, cold and mocking. "Thought you could hide, Zorth? You and your pet human are done." Kira's eyes flashed, her grip tightening on her blade. "Stay back," she hissed to Jake, stepping forward. He ignored her, drawing his blaster. "Not happening," he said, his voice firm. The rogue ship fired, a plasma bolt scorching the ground between them. Jake dove, tackling Kira behind a boulder as the blast showered them with dirt. "We need to take it out," he said, his breath hot against her ear. She nodded, her jaw set. Its cannons overheat after 3 shots. Wait for the pause. They moved as one, years of instinct bridging their differences. Jake fired a decoy shot, drawing the rogue's attention, while Kira sprinted to the Eclipse. The ship cloaked, vanishing in a shimmer. The rogue pilot hesitated, its cannons swiveling. 2 more blasts scorched the ravine, then silence, the pause Kira predicted. Her ship reappeared behind the rogue, firing a precise pulse that disabled its weapons. Jake seized the moment, vaulting onto the Maverick and ramming the rogue's hull, sending it crashing into the ravine's wall. The scout ship sputtered, its engines failing, and the pilot ejected, fleeing into the forest. Jake and Kira landed, their chests heaving. "Nice teamwork," he said, wiping soot from his face. Kira sheathed her blade, her expression unreadable. "Don't get used to it," she replied, but her voice lacked venom. They returned to their repairs, the urgency sharper now. The rogue scout meant the Coalition wasn't far behind. As Jake welded a patch onto the Maverick's thruster, he spoke, his tone casual but probing. "So what's the deal with you and your kind?" Why do they hate you? Kira's hand stilled, her eyes fixed on her ship's panel. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice low, measured. Zorith value perfection, strength, obedience, loyalty to the collective. I question too much. I race for myself, not their glory. She glanced at him, her amber eyes raw. They call me a traitor for it. Jake paused, the weight of her words sinking in. He thought of Earth, of the skeptics who'd laughed when he signed up for the race, calling him a fool for thinking humans could compete. Sound familiar, he said. Back home, they said I was crazy to try. Said humans don't belong out here. Kira's lips twitched, almost a smile. Maybe we're both crazy. She turned back to her repairs, but the air between them felt lighter, their shared defiance a fragile bond. Jake shared a piece of his own story, his voice steady but tinged with pride. I grew up on a dustball colony, fixing junk ships for smugglers. Learned to fly before I could walk. This race? It's my shot to show the galaxy humans aren't just scavengers. Kira listened, her hands moving slower, her eyes flicking to him with new interest. You're stubborn, she said finally. I'll give you that. Their ships were nearly ready when the forest's groans grew louder, a warning of the race's next phase. They climbed into their cockpits, the ravine's walls glowing faintly as the twin suns rose. Jake checked his systems, his fingers flying over the controls. Kira's voice came through the comms, crisp and focused. The forest core is next. Tighter paths, more spines. Stay sharp. Jake grinned, buckling his harness. You worried about me, Zorith? She scoffed, but he caught the hint of a laugh. Just don't crash. I'd hate to win by default. They launched, their ships streaking back into the cosmic thorn forest. The core was a nightmare, trees packed so close their branches formed a tunnel, spines firing in relentless waves. Jake's crazy tactics kept him alive, ramming trunks to clear paths, while Kira's cloaking gave her an edge, slipping through gaps he couldn't. They traded the lead, their ships scraping past each other, hulls sparking. The crowd's cheers echoed from the platforms above, their tone shifting. Less mockery, more intrigue. The human still in it, a Vrax chittered. He's no match for the Zorith, a Krillian roared. Jake ignored them, his focus razor-sharp. The forest core ended at a final checkpoint, a sprawling platform ringed with repair drones. Jake and Kira landed, their ships battered but functional. They climbed out, sweat-soaked and bruised but alive. Kira's arm was stiff, her bandage stained, but she moved with grim determination. Jake tossed her a water canister, which she caught without looking. Thanks, she said, her voice softer than before. He nodded, leaning against the Maverick. We make a good team, he said, half-testing the waters. She glanced at him, her smirk returning. Don't push your luck, human. As they refueled, Kira's expression grew serious. The rogues won't stop, she said, her eyes scanning the platform's edges. They're after the prize to restore their clan's power. They'll hit us in the final round, where the rules don't matter. Jake's jaw tightened, his mind already itching for the challenge. Then we'll be ready, he said. You and me. Kira met his gaze, her amber eyes steady. For now, she said, but there was a promise in her voice, a vow that their partnership wasn't just convenience anymore. Hell's Gate roared open, a maw of destruction that made the cosmic thorn forest seem tame. The final round of the interplanetary death race was a crucible of shifting landscapes. Cliffs crumbled into glowing chasms, geysers erupted with scalding jets, and walls of flame surged skyward, swallowing ships in fiery gulps. The alien planet's twin suns blazed overhead, their light warped by heat haze, casting the course in a blood-red glow. From above, the race was a streak of chaos, a comet's tail of scorched metal and shattered dreams. Jake Thorne gripped the Maverick's controls, his brown eyes locked on the nightmare ahead. Sweat stung his face, his heart hammering like a warp engine on overload. This was it, the galaxy's deadliest gauntlet, and he was diving in head first. The starting klaxon wailed, and the Maverick surged forward, its patched hull groaning under the strain. Kira's Eclipse streaked beside him, a sleek shadow cutting through the chaos. Their ships danced a deadly ballet, trading the lead as the terrain shifted. Jake veered left, dodging a magma spout that sprayed molten rock across his path. The heat seared his cockpit, warning alarms shrieking. Kira's voice crackled through the comms, sharp with adrenaline. "Keep up, human!" she shouted, her ship banking hard to blast a falling boulder out of his way. Jake grinned, his hands steady despite the chaos. "Right behind you," he shot back, flooring the thrusters to match her pace. The course was a beast, its traps relentless. A cliff collapsed ahead, forcing Jake to pull up sharply, the Maverick's belly scraping the jagged edge. Shards of rock pelted his hull, each hit a hammer blow. Kira's Eclipse flickered, her cloaking tech letting her slip through a narrowing pass unscathed. She reappeared ahead, her ship's pulse cannons clearing a path through a curtain of flame. "Show off," Jake muttered, but his grin widened. Her skill was magnetic, every move precise, every risk calculated. He pushed the Maverick harder, skimming a chasm so close the hull sparked, its glow reflected in the crowd's stunned faces on the floating platforms above. "The human's still alive," Acrylian roared, its voice a mix of shock and grudging respect. Jake didn't care for their cheers. He was here to win, not to impress. The terrain shifted again, a geyser erupting beneath the Maverick. Jake yanked the controls, the ship lurching sideways as steam scorched his wing. Kira's Eclipse swooped in, her countermeasures deflecting a barrage of debris. "Focus, human," she snapped, her voice cutting through the alarms. "I'm trying," he growled, wrestling the ship back on course. Their teamwork was instinctive now, honed by the forest trials. Jake took the lead, diving through a collapsing tunnel of rock, while Kira covered his flank, her cannons blasting obstacles into dust. The crowd's chants grew louder, a thunderous pulse. "Zorth, human." For once, Jake's name wasn't alone, and it lit a fire in his chest. Halfway through Hell's Gate, exhaustion sank its claws into Jake. His vision blurred, the cockpit's red glow swimming in his eyes. His hands slipped on the controls, slick with sweat. The race's toll, days of relentless danger, no sleep, no mercy, was catching up. A plasma trap triggered ahead, a web of energy crackling across the course. The Maverick's engine stalled, caught in the trap's grip. Jake slammed the controls, cursing as the ship shuddered. "Come on," he snarled, but the engines whined powerless. The trap's energy pulsed, seconds from frying his systems. A shadow fell over his cockpit. Kira's Eclipse dove in, her ship's hull grazing his. The comms crackled, her voice fierce. "Move over." Before Jake could react, she leapt from her cockpit, landing on the Maverick's hull with Zorth agility. The wind howled, her silver hair whipping as she pried open an access panel. "What you doing?" Jake yelled, his voice hoarse. She didn't answer, her hands a blur as she rerouted power. Sparks flew, her armor scorching, but she didn't flinch. With a final twist, she slammed the panel shut and vaulted into his cockpit, hauling him upright. "You're not dying on me," she growled, slinging his arm over her shoulders. Kira's strength surged, a faint glow pulsing from her skin, a Zorth gift, raw and electric. She seized the Maverick's controls, piloting both ships with Jake braced against her. Her touch burned, not with heat, but with energy, steadying his faltering pulse. "Giving up already?" she teased, her tone fierce but laced with something softer. Jake forced a ragged breath, his head clearing. "Not a chance," he rasped, gripping her shoulder to steady himself. The plasma trap fizzled out, Kira's quick fix saving the Maverick. She guided both ships through the narrowing pass, her Eclipse tethered to his by a magnetic lock. The crowd roared, their voices a tidal wave. "Zorth! Human!" Jake's chest tightened, not just from exhaustion, but from the fire in Kira's eyes, the way she fought for him. They cleared the pass, the terrain opening into a blazing valley. Walls of flame surged on either side, the heat warping the air. Jake's strength returned, his hands finding the controls. "I've got it," he said, his voice steadier. Kira slid back, her glow fading, but she stayed close, her shoulder brushing his. "Don't make me regret this," she muttered, her smirk faint but real. Jake chuckled, banking the Maverick through a gap in the flames. Kira's Eclipse followed, her cannons clearing a path. They moved as one, their ships a single force against Hell's Gate's wrath. The valley narrowed, the flames closing in. A geyser erupted ahead, spraying molten rock. Jake dove low, the hull skimming the ground, while Kira climbed, her ship arcing over the spray. "Nice move," she called, her voice bright with adrenaline. "Learn from the best," he shot back, his grin fierce. Their banter cut through the tension, a spark of humanity in the alien chaos. The crowd's chants grew frantic, their platforms shaking with fervor. Jake caught glimpses of their faces, tentacled Vrax, scaled Krillians, multi-eyed Zorith, all watching not with scorn, but with awe. He wasn't just surviving. He was rewriting their story of what humans could do. Another trap loomed, a grid of plasma beams crisscrossing the valley. Jake's hands flew over the controls, weaving the Maverick through the gaps. Kira matched him, her Eclipse a shadow at his side. A beam grazed his wing, the hull glowing red. "Too close," Kira snapped, firing a pulse to disrupt the grid. The beams flickered, giving them a window. Jake gunned the engines, the Maverick screaming through the gap. Kira followed, her ship's cloaking flickering under the strain. They cleared the grid, the valley widening, but the finish line was still a distant shimmer, guarded by Hell's Gate's final trials. Jake's muscles burned, his body pushed beyond its limits. Kira's glow had faded, her own strength waning. They were battered, their ships scarred, but their resolve held. "We're almost there," Jake said, his voice low, more to himself than her. Kira's hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch. "Then don't slow down," she said, her amber eyes fierce. Jake nodded, his jaw set. Hell's Gate could throw everything it had. They weren't backing down. The valley of Hell's Gate pulsed with heat, its molten rivers hissing as they carved scars into the alien planet's crust. Jake Thorne and Kira Zorith tore through the chaos, their ships the Maverick and the Eclipse battered but unyielding. The finish line shimmered ahead, a portal of light amid a wasteland of fire and ruin. Jake's hands gripped the controls, his muscles screaming with fatigue. Kira's presence beside him, her amber eyes fierce, was a spark keeping him sharp. The interplanetary death race had pushed them to their limits, but the final stretch of Hell's Gate was a beast determined to break them. A low rumble shook the valley, the ground splitting as a chasm yawned beneath them. Jake banked the Maverick hard, the hull scraping a jagged outcrop. Sparks flew, warning lights flashing across his console. Kira's Eclipse veered in sync, her ship's pulse cannons blasting a cascade of falling rock into dust. "Stay tight," she barked through the comms, her voice a blade cutting through the roar of the race. Jake nodded, his jaw clenched. "Not going anywhere," he shot back, diving through the gap she cleared. Their ships moved like extensions of each other, a dance of instinct and trust forged in the race's crucible. The terrain grew merciless, a maze of erupting geysers and collapsing spires. Jake spotted a narrow pass ahead, its walls lined with plasma vents that spat crackling arcs. He gunned the engines, the Maverick screaming through the gap as vents flared, singeing his wing. Kira followed, her cloaking tech flickering under the strain, her ship a ghostly blur. A vent sparked too close, and her hull glowed red, alarms blaring. "Ka!" Jake yelled, his heart lurching. Her voice came back, strained but steady. "I'm Fina. Keep moving." He hesitated, his instinct to protect her warring with the race's demands. Her Eclipse stabilized, and she surged ahead, her smirk audible. "Don't get sentimental, human." The pass opened into a blazing canyon, its walls towering like the jaws of a titan. The finish line glowed closer, but a shadow loomed behind them, a rogue ship, the Coalition's last stand. Its hull bristled with banned plasma cannons, its pilot's voice a snarl through the comms. "No human filth, or Zorith traitor, takes this prize." The rogue fired, a barrage of bolts scorching the canyon walls. Jake swerved, the Maverick shuddering as a shot grazed its tail. Kira's Eclipse dove low, her cannons returning fire, but the rogue's armor absorbed the hits. "It's too strong," she hissed, her voice tight with frustration. Jake's mind raced, his eyes scanning the canyon. The rogue was faster, its weapons deadly, but the terrain was their ally. "Follow my lead," he shouted, banking the Maverick toward a crumbling spire. Kira hesitated, then matched his course, her trust in him unspoken but absolute. Jake aimed for the spire's base, ramming it with the Maverick's reinforced nose. The impact jarred his teeth, the spire collapsing in a cascade of rock. The rogue veered to avoid the debris, its cannons faltering. Kira seized the moment, firing a precise pulse that disabled its thrusters. The rogue ship spun, crashing into the canyon wall in a fireball that lit the sky. The explosion's shockwave rocked the Maverick, sending it spinning toward a fiery abyss. Jake fought the controls, but the ship was caught in the chasm's pull, flames licking its hull. Kira's Eclipse was no better, its cloaking offline, its wings scorched. "Eject!" Kira yelled, her hand lunging for the Maverick's ejector. She moved to push Jake free, her eyes fierce with resolve. "Go!" she shouted, ready to sacrifice herself. Jake's hand shot out, grabbing her waist and yanking her back. "Not without you," he roared, his voice raw. He slammed the pilot's harness down, securing them both, their bodies pressed tight in the cockpit. Jake floored the thrusters, the Maverick's engines screaming as they fought the abyss's pull. Kira's hands joined his on the controls, her Zorith strength surging. Flames engulfed them, the cockpit a furnace, but in that split second, Kira turned to him. Her lips crashed against his, a desperate, electric kiss that burned hotter than the fire around them. A warm energy flooded Jake's veins. Zorith healing power, raw and pulsing, mingled with something deeper, unspoken. His exhaustion melted, his focus razor-sharp. Kira pulled back, her cheeks flushed, her amber eyes flashing. "Don't get ideas," she muttered, her voice unsteady. "Just keeping you alive." Jake grinned, his heart pounding. "Sure, Zorith, whatever you say." Together, they wrenched the Maverick free, the ship lurching upward as the abyss roared below. Kira's Eclipse followed, tethered by her magnetic lock. The blast cleared, the canyon opening to reveal the finish line, a shimmering portal framed by wreckage. Jake took the helm, his strength renewed, while Kira manned the defenses, her cannons fending off debris that rained from the collapsing canyon. "Almost there," Jake shouted, his voice fierce with determination. Kira's hand brushed his shoulder, a silent vow. "Then don't screw it up," she said, her smirk fierce but warm. The final stretch was a gauntlet of fire and ruin. A geyser erupted, spraying molten rock. Jake dove low, the Maverick skimming the ground, while Kira climbed, her Eclipse arcing over the spray. Debris pelted their hulls, each hit a test of their resolve. Jake's hands flew over the controls, weaving through a collapsing arch of rock. Kira's cannons cleared the path, her precision a lifeline. The crowd's roars echoed from the platforms above, a tidal wave of sound. Human, human. For the first time, Jake felt the weight of their awe, not just for him, but for what he and Kira had become together. The portal loomed, its light blinding. Jake's vision tunneled, every ounce of his will focused on the finish. Kira's voice crackled through the comms, steady and fierce. "Together," she said, her Eclipse aligning with the Maverick. They surged forward, their ships battered, scorched, but unbroken. The portal swallowed them, a flash of light erasing the chaos of Hell's Gate. They crossed the finish line, collapsing in their cockpits as the crowd's silence shattered into a deafening roar. Human, human. The race was over, their victory undeniable. Jake's chest heaved, his body spent, but his eyes found Kira's through the cockpit glass. They'd faced death and won, not just as rivals, but as something more. The victor's platform hummed with energy, a vast disk of gleaming metal suspended above the scorched ruins of Hell's Gate. The interplanetary death race was over, its chaos replaced by a thunderous roar from the alien crowd. Jake Thorne stumbled from the Maverick's cockpit, his legs unsteady, his body a map of bruises and burns. The air smelled of ozone and molten rock, the twin suns casting long shadows across the platform. Kira Zoreth emerged from the eclipse, her silver hair matted with soot, her armor cracked but her posture unyielding. Her amber eyes scanned the crowd, defiant despite the green blood seeping through her bandage. The spectators, tentacled Vrax, scaled Krillians, multi-eyed Zoreth, chanted Jake's name, their voices a tidal wave that shook the air. Human, human. The mockery was gone, replaced by awe, and Jake felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Medics swarmed, their scanners buzzing, but Jake waved them off, his gaze fixed on Kira. She stood at the platform's edge, holding the prize, a radiant gem the size of a fist, its facets pulsing with light that promised to restore dying worlds. Her fingers traced its surface, her expression unreadable. Jake limped toward her, each step a battle against exhaustion. The crowd chants faded to a dull roar as he reached her side. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. Kira's eyes flicked to his, sharp but softer than before. "I'll live," she said, her tone dry. "You look worse." Jake grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thanks for the compliment." She held up the gem, its light catching the scars on her armor. "This is what we fought for," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. The crowd hushed, sensing the moment's weight. Jake nodded, his hand brushing the blaster at his hip, a reflex from days of danger. "Worth it?" he asked, half teasing. Kira's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. "Ask me after we split it." With a deft movement, she snapped the gem in two, its halves glowing with equal brilliance. She tossed one to Jake, the motion casual but deliberate. He caught it, the gem cool against his palm, its weight a promise of hope for Earth's struggling colonies. "You earned it," she said, her voice steady. "But don't think this is over. You owe me a rematch. No traps, no rules." Jake's grin widened, the challenge sparking something alive in him. "Only if I get that healing trick again," he shot back, his tone playful but edged with truth. Kira's eyes narrowed, but a flush crept up her neck, barely visible beneath her silver hair. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a mock growl. "Keep dreaming, human." Before he could retort, she shoved him, her Zorith strength sending him sprawling into the platform's sandy edge. Jake hit the ground with a grunt, the gem clutched tight. The crowd erupted in laughter, the tension breaking like a wave. Kira loomed over him, her smirk sharp but warm. Then, for the first time, she laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that cut through the noise, softening her warrior's edge. It was a sound Jake wanted to hear again. He took her offered hand, her grip firm as she pulled him up. Their hands lingered, a silent acknowledgement of what they'd survived together. The crowd's cheers swelled, but Jake's world narrowed to Kira's amber eyes, the way they held his with a mix of challenge and respect. "Not bad for a soft skin," she said, her voice low, teasing. Jake chuckled, brushing sand from his jacket. "Not bad for a Zorith who doesn't play nice." Her smirk deepened, but she didn't pull away, their hands still clasped until a Vrax official's voice boomed, summoning them to the ceremony. The formalities were a blur, medals draped around their necks, speeches in alien tongues, the crowd's roars shaking the platform. Jake stood beside Kira, their shoulders brushing, the gem heavy in his pocket. The officials praised their victory, calling them a union of defiance, a symbol of what courage could achieve. Jake caught Kira's eye during a particularly long speech, and she rolled hers, a silent jab at the pomp. He stifled a laugh, the moment a spark of their shared rebellion. When the ceremony ended, the crowd surged forward, but Jake and Kira slipped away, drawn to a quiet overlook at the platform's edge. The planet's twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the scarred racecourse in gold. The air was cooler here, the chaos of Hell's Gate a distant memory. Jake leaned against a railing, the gem's glow faint through his pocket. Kira stood beside him, her armor glinting in the fading light. "You surprised me out there," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't think a human could keep up." Her voice was soft, the words a confession. Jake turned to her, his brown eyes steady. "I didn't think a Zorith could care about fair play. Guess we're both full of surprises." She stepped closer, her amber eyes locking with his, a spark dancing in their depths. "This doesn't mean I like you," she warned, but her smile betrayed her, warm and unguarded. Jake's grin was slow, deliberate. "Good. Keeps things interesting." The air between them crackled, charged with the weight of their journey. Rivals turned allies, bound by trust and a spark of something more. Kira's hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch that lingered like a promise. They stood in companionable silence, the race course stretching out below, a testament to their triumph. The gem in Jake's pocket pulsed, but it was Kira's presence that felt like the real prize, a challenge, a partner, a future unwritten.